So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now introduce our panelists to you, and I want to thank them very much for taking the time to join us today. First, I would like to welcome, of course, Therese White. Therese has extensive experience of strategic human resource management, organizational transformation, and change management. She joined ANSA Group's parent board of directors on June 15, 2007 as a non-executive director, and in January 2011, she assumed the executive role of Group HR Director. Therese, could you please join me on stage? I must say, Therese took up this invitation without any hesitation. Teresa, my apologies, but we must apologize for having you to reschedule your entire day, but we appreciate it. I would now like to invite Nirad Tiwari, again, no stranger to many of you. Nirad, of course, was the former CEO of the TTCIC, but now he is the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce, and he has 25 years of experience in media, communications, management, education, and international relations. Nirad, thank you very much for, again, taking your time to join us today. Next up, I would like to invite Rhonda O'Neill. Rhonda has, again, another representative of an organization that has been partnering with Pride TT for the last year. She is the senior HR professional with over 25 years experience in financial services and education with Scotiabank, Trinidad and Tobago, and she's an advocate for equity and inclusion. So thank you again, Rhonda, and thank you to Scotiabank.
Absolutely.
Next up, I'd like to invite Marsha Naidu Chuchai. Marsha possesses an MSME in Human Resource Management, and she started her career in 2004 at the Employers Consultative Association as an industrial relations specialist, subsequently transferring to the Employers Solutions Center as a human resources officer. She has held positions in human resources and industrial relations, and Marsha joined the HADCO group in January 2022 and is now in the position of Group Human Resources Manager. So thank you again, Marsha. And an old colleague of mine, not in years in terms of age, but in terms of experience, Mr. Jonathan Cumberbatch. I remember Jonathan was one of the first persons to sign an employment contract for me when I was at the Hilton. Oops, I'm not supposed to say that other age here. Jonathan is the Assistant Vice President, Human Resources and Administration at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and is actually the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber's Employee Labor Relations Committee. Jonathan, if you could join us, please. He has served both in the public and private sectors, so we're very, very pleased to have this esteemed panel with us today. Thank you so much.
I'll squeeze it.
Yes. So we did ask each of you in preparing for today, because we know it's a ticklish subject matter sometimes, or you may disagree with me. You may say it's not ticklish at all. We did ask each of you to share some opening thoughts around DEI and really to focus in on maybe some of the lessons learned or experiences in each of your fields and your various organizations in trying to get this policy progressed. So if I could start with Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to talk about DEI in the broadest sense and then get a little bit more granular around issues that might be particularly pertinent for Pride TT. We, as a nation, took a very long time to get equal opportunities legislation. And when that act came out at the very last minute, something was expressly excluded, which, to my mind, goes against any society that values a rights-based approach and rights for all people, and creating a framework where people feel included. That's at the legal level. So at the group level at McAL, we've always had, and I say always, that certainly in my experience, a non-discrimination policy that dealt with all areas of status that we perceived at the time, and also deals expressly with harassment, both normal harassment, which is any sort of bullying, and specifically sexual harassment, which would be sexual in nature. Now, there was reference to the appeal decision where there's some sense now that the Equal Opportunities Act does cover sexual harassment. It's not quite as simple as that. It really doesn't cover it in its broadest sense, and it's almost like a sort of backdoor way of getting protection, but it relies on the way the Act is framed, which is around having comparators, and therefore, in the case of making some sort of sexual harassment claim, you'd have to show that the detriment was to one person on a grounds of their status would not have happened to somebody else. So it envisages a binary setup. So if you had a bisexual manager who was bullying somebody, and it could be equally argued that it would be male-female bullies, then you will have no protection as the appeal is drafted. So it's important to note these things. And therefore, it is important that sexual harassment is covered without need for comparators. It is just treated as absolutely wrong, and that's reflected in how the policy is drafted. We at ANSA McAL have not waited on the legal machinery to address those issues. We have had these positive rights in our HR policy manuals as they've evolved. When CAISO did its very good work on LGBTQI plus policy potential, we realized that there were gaps in our policies, particularly around transitioning and particularly around envisaging things beyond a sort of binary setup. And we were able, and what's good about being a local regional employer is that we were able to make these changes quite quickly, and we updated our framework. My only request is that sometimes we may not get the language right. Let us know, because this is new territory for us. We want to do the right things, and we're going to do the right things. But if we get the language wrong, please let us know, because the idea is not to exclude. The idea is around people coming to work, their full, honest, authentic selves, and living into their potential, and not feeling excluded or denigrated or less than somebody else for whatever reason. And so that's why I'm very pleased to be here today to talk about these issues. I wish the room had more people, but we have to start somewhere. And I was very heartened by the few slides ago to see how many employers are getting behind this, particularly big, traditionally conservative type employers. So it's the beginning of something really good, and thank you for having.
Thank you very much, Teresa. You're right. It's a ripple, but it will spread. And today is the first time that something like this, where persons like yourselves have come forward en masse almost to support these initiatives. I must commend you for being upfront about the mistakes or the oversight sometimes in this new fertile ground that we're all building and watering. So I hope people take that away, that don't be afraid of asking or being open to feedback. And that's the only way that we can really move it forward. So we'll come back to some of those points. And again, thank you very much. I must say, ANSA McAL went beyond the call of duty, and you supported us as well in ensuring that this event was able to come off. So thank you very much for that. Nirad, some of the persons, I think all of the persons on this stage may actually belong to your organization or work closely with the American Chamber of Commerce. We heard earlier from the American Embassy about the policies of the state, the headquarters. But in your capacity, could you share some feedback in terms of being a local, operating in this context and having to manage that sort of American policy directive, and what your membership and your other experiences around these issues, because you have been a long-standing advocate in this area, and I want to commend you for that as well on behalf of the community. But any thoughts around navigating all of that?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Pride TT for inviting AMCHAM. And it's really good to see so many different organizations. In fact, that's what started AMCHAM's advocacy. It was a joint effort of CAISO, Silver Lining, and I think 2 other groups that came to us to present back in 2004, 2005, a list of issues. But before I get into that, I just want to ask in advance for an apology. I consider myself an ally, but I'm still learning. And so if I, misstate anything or relate an experience in any way, please let me know. I'm asking your permission. I asked Rudy in advance if it would be okay to use queer as the collective pronoun.
The council granted approval.
Okay. So Rudy's head of the council protecting us from the apocalypse, right? In addition, yeah. So, yeah, our advocacy and my own advocacy started a long time ago. I mean, I'm here as CEO of AMCHAM. I'm not here as Neeraj Tiwari. The organization is behind this. And before we made our public statement in 2005, calling for the expansion of the Equal Opportunities Act to cover issues of gender identity and sexual orientation, it was unanimously approved after discussion at a board meeting. Subsequent to that statement, we did a survey of our membership back then, and 85% of our members supported the statement. Back then, I suspect it's increased now, we just haven't done an updated survey. We are the only chamber to have signed on to CAISO's LGBTQI in the workplace policy. And we are encouraging members to work with it. I'm also proud to say that we practice what we preach. And to us, that's what's important, to show up. And I'll relate some examples where I didn't quite show up at first, or I wasn't sure if I would. And this is something that I think as allies, as people who are not living the experience, we have to force ourselves to introspect and to be more conscious of, and to acknowledge when we get it wrong and ask for help, right? So one of Pride TT's directors is employed with AMCHAM, Trinidad and Tobago. Who he loves does not matter to us. Can he get my job done? And can he do it on time? That's what matters. And he does. So when we, as I said, we made the call, we signed on to the DEI policy. Last year for the vaccination drives, so I'm going to relate this story, and again, I ask for your forgiveness if I relate it badly. But it's about showing up. At least that's the point I hope I can communicate. A friend put me in touch with someone who was transitioning and as an artist, because we wanted to do some artwork. They take the Jab Jab campaign is a campaign that we conceptualized. Well, she conceptualized for us, and we went on with it. But I knew her prior, and I'd worked with her prior. So it was a little surprising because I didn't know. I mean, we hadn't been in touch and whatever. So, I mean, it wasn't an issue. Of course, we just wanted the artwork done. She's good at what she does. She gets it done. But when we did the vaccination drive for the business community at Napa with the TT Chamber and AMCHAM, supported by the TTCIC, did that drive. She volunteered to do a mural, and it was a beautiful mural, right? And she said she's coming to do this for the children because they had gotten the vaccines for the 12 and overs, and she wanted the children to have beauty when they came in, because it's scary. Not everybody likes needles and so on. So she did it, but we didn't want to waste it. So we offered it to the Ministry of Education after, and they accepted immediately. And I'd like to think that this is an overall positive story. So we arranged a handover ceremony, and she called me and she asked, she said, well, you know, if I'm coming, I asked her to speak because it's her art. And she said, well, can I come in a dress? I'm like, well, yeah, I guess it's up to you. But, you know, just as you wouldn't want me to dress inappropriately, just don't dress inappropriately. But if you want to wear a dress, wear a dress. And the battle I had with myself for a while was, do I call the ministry and say, look, heads up, this is what's going to, this is what to expect. And I said, you know what? No, because if I do, I am saying there's something that you should be concerned about, or that's not right, or that's abnormal. And so I didn't. And she came in her dress, we had our ceremony, and it was beautiful. The Minister of Education and the PS and everybody was there, and the media covered it, and the focus was on the art. And but I could just have easily have not and made that call, and then somebody could have said, well, you know, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't, so on and so on and so on. So I think it's a process. And in terms of your question on policies, Rudy, I think by and large, and as I said, the survey supported it, right? So the board members represent companies, and therefore all their companies are behind it. Scotiabank was on the board at the time, continues to be on the board, and is leading in this really from the business community's perspective. We're a local organization. We're operating here. We're registered in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're completely independent of any government, including the US and the Trinidad and Tobago government. And we will say and do what we think is important, because AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago consciously sees the role of business as more than just profits. And so we see our role as influencing the society to become more and more of the society that we desire for ourselves collectively. And that means sometimes we will get involved in non-business issues. Now that's a risk, because then people want you to speak about everything, and they want you to speak every time there's an issue, which you can't do. We're not going to be a dog barking after every car that passes. But we will always try to show up on the important issues. And we will stand firm on our position on these issues. And trust me, we get licks. Personally, people say things, do things, complain about me and about the organization. But that's okay, because we are clear on what we believe, why we believe it, and what are the benefits, beyond just being good for business, which you've heard a lot about and which we certainly endorse.
Thank you very much. And you'll get no complaints here. I think that is bravery in its own right, and it should be commended. And again, it's almost like a well-kept secret, because I mean, I've been around the organization for many years, and sometimes you still get, and I'm going to ask Jonathan to weigh in on this in my segue, you get this sense in the ecosystem that businesses aren't open to having these conversations. But 85%, as you said, in 2005, understood the issue, obviously, and accepted the position. And I can tell you it's grown since then. So that's an interesting point. But showing up is critical. And I hope that's one of the key takeaways from what you just shared, is that sometimes that's all you need to do. Jonathan, on that point, now I intimated earlier that we've crossed paths before in another international organization.
We have history.
And sometimes people say, this is an international kind of thing. I mean, if you look at some of the leaders,
yes,
thankfully on this stage, we have local and international representation.
Yes.
But in your capacity, especially at the chamber, and in your roles formally,
yes,
is it really an internationally led movement, or what has been the sense around the local companies in this space? Nirad mentioned 85%. I'm sure some of that 85% would have been locals.
No, of course. I can, well, I'm wearing different hats as you're aware. For a large part of my career, I have served as head of HR for various multinationals. Therefore, anti-discriminatory policies, guidelines, etc., largely informed by American legislation and guidelines, would have been easily impacted across the workplace. It was understood this is a non-discriminatory organization. Where that has not been the case, I presently at head of HR at UTT, we have advocated, and it's wherever I've worked, I've been one to advocate that this is a zero tolerance in terms of intolerant behavior. Recently, we just signed off with our resident union an anti-harassment policy, and I've been a big advocate of that as against anti-sexual harassment. I think that makes things narrow. It's anti-harassment. No one working anywhere should encounter anything that makes them uncomfortable on the job. Under that umbrella, of course, we itemize gender, orientation, etc. Therein is the opportunity. And I applaud all the stakeholders for seeing the vision of that particular policy and getting it through. So that's how things stand at UTT. But certainly, I'm not alone. Several colleagues, I think, have also taken the progressive approach. We live in what still has to be regarded as a conservative society, much like much of the English-speaking Caribbean. That said, there are many progressive minds amongst the leadership, and we are cognizant of what has been going on globally in terms of trends and what we need to anticipate, what we need to be sensitized to. We're in the heart of head of the Labor Relations Committee at the Chamber and representing the Chamber de facto here today. It is quite simple. The Chamber is here to listen. By that and by extension, the business community it represents. Don't think I can add too much more than that, but yeah, here to listen, here to take notes, here to communicate further what other areas of sensitization, what are the senses of policy and additional guidelines we may wish to impress on our membership. It's important, as has been echoed here at the panel, that we get this right. No one is, we don't know it all. This is fairly new ground. It is fluid. It is changing. There's legislation going on in several communities globally that are shifting the dialogue or influencing the dialogue globally. And we take our notes.
No, excellent. I take your point on sometimes looking at issues from a broader lens. And that has been one of the main ways, Nirad mentioned allyship, of how we've built allies, because many of the issues that we face are centered in patriarchy and that misogynistic type of ecosystem that some of us on the stage may have either benefited from or been victims of in different ways. And sometimes people don't even realize that, obviously a lot of oxygen has been given in relation to what women go through and that equity conversation. But men who don't meet the man criteria face very similar concerns.
And not to cut you across,
Sure.
it's something I think it's also important, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here would have practiced as well. As head of HR in any particular organization, so much of the work population takes your lead by your attitude, your perceived attitude towards various groups, be it women, be it LGBTQ plus, etc. Any snide remarks, any crude remarks, any jokes made regarding particular groups can have a significant impact on the culture of that organization. You can almost sense it. I interact with someone who may have identified as gay, and you can see in the room, everyone is sensing, let's see whether he's going to cringe. Let's see. It is so important that you show a healthy and open, and without pretense, in my case at least, that this is what we are, and this is how we're going to be working and living with each other here. Just a little sidebar on that, but yeah, and I'm sure everyone.
And we're going to come back to that topic of culture, which I know we're all familiar with. I'm going to ask, Rhonda, I mentioned earlier that Scotiabank partnered with us. What I didn't underscore was that bold statement that was made a couple months ago, which it's interesting, right? Because we're talking about how open certain segments of the society can be, especially business leaders or businesses. But when Scotia made the policy, maybe I'll let you talk a little bit about exactly what you all did and what led to that. There was almost like a hush in the society. People were waiting for the backlash. And from what I can tell, there was none. But share with us your Scotia's journey to making that statement in the local context and what may have come out of it or not.
Sure thing, Rudy, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting us again. You know, Rudy, Scotiabank is committed to being the bank of choice for the diverse communities that we serve. And we focus on three key areas: our customers, our employees, and the community. For our customers, we want to ensure we offer products and services that are free from bias. We want to ensure that our marketing, our procurement processes all represent the communities that we serve. For our employees, we ensure that they have a sense of belonging. And beyond that, we want them to feel as though their uniqueness is valued and integrated on a daily basis. Across our footprint, we feel that all persons have rights, and once it's within the parameters of the law, we feel that benefits should be equal to all. And I believe that's what you're talking about, making benefits available to everyone. In terms of our customer feedback and our employee feedback, they have both been very favorable. All right, our employees have said to us that they are proud to be a Scotiabanker, and 96% recently surveyed said that, you know, they believe that Scotiabank is an inclusive organization. So a lot of what we do, Rudy, is to walk that talk, and we want to give a clear signal that we value all individuals, and we want to create that sense of value for our employees and our customers.
Sense of value. We've touched on it throughout the course of the morning. You know, when employees get up and they know they're going to be joining their comrades, their co-workers, and they have to walk through that door, they know exactly what type of atmosphere they're going to enter into, and it will impact their output. But again, on behalf of the entire community, it was the moment it dropped, my phone lit up, and well, with social media these days, the entire community got behind Scotiabank almost overnight, and it's like, I'm changing banks. So it was a wonderful step, but we saw the genuineness behind it. And for you all to partner with us to host and to evolve the Generation Gap program was amazing. And just a quick shout out to Faye Ferdinandez, yes, our project lead for Generation Gap.
Absolutely. And we have also partnered with Faye recently for a lunch and learn. And Faye came in and she did a lunch and learn where we educate our employees around the rights of Pride TT members and so on. So it was amazing.
Well, we look forward. We look forward to continuing that partnership as best as we can. So thank you again.
You're most welcome.
Now, Marsha, I know that I will let people know that this came to you as a bit of a surprise. And it's, I believe you shared with me, it's the first time you'll be sharing in a capacity like this. But that's amazing, because I think having listened to your colleagues, and when I spoke to John, he was very upset with me. He said, why didn't you send this earlier? We need to be part of this. And to get that immediate interest, and to the point where he wanted to show up himself, but he was able to make the arrangements, and you are here today with us. So I know you've asked us to show something for you, but before we do that, perhaps you could share a little bit about, you know, what HADCO's focus has been, listening to some of your colleagues, but in particular, I know that you also have a very diverse employee cross-section, so perhaps you could share a little bit about that as well.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for including us in today's proceedings. We're excited to be here, as John would have conveyed to you. At HADCO, we are extremely cognizant of our responsibility to the community, our interactions with our employees, as well as our interactions with the community at large. And we have a saying at HADCO, if we help our employees, we're helping a family, and by extension, helping a community. So one of our core values at HADCO really is respect and tolerance. And it is ingrained in our daily operations, in every aspect of operations at HADCO. We are at the infancy stage in terms of developing DEI policy, but we do have an environment where we do not tolerate harassment, bullying of any form. So we have initiatives along the line of diversity. One of my first conversations with John when as part of my onboarding in January, was the issue of diversity and where he saw it going and the initiatives that they had in place at HADCO currently. So
that's awesome. That again, another leading organization has preemptively almost taken the bull by the horns, and I want to jump on that. Teresa mentioned it earlier. There's this. Sometimes people wait for government policy to kick in, but we know that legislation in and of itself does not solve problems. We have a lot of laws in Trinidad and Tobago, yet we still have some challenges that we read about in the newspapers. Perhaps some of you can jump in around the role of companies, private sector, through working and creating their respective cultures. How can that then have an osmosis effect into the wider society? Because we talk about culture change a lot in the country, and sometimes it sounds like boiling the ocean. But maybe some thoughts on, what your roles are and how you think that companies, if more companies get on board, we can have a better society overall.
Ladies first.
Okay. I think it's a really good question, because culture has been always that sort of elusive thing that one needs to deal with in any kind of change, organizational, countrywide, and so forth. And legislation is critical because it's the rules, it's the framework that sets the moral tone, if you like. But over the past few years, as I get well into my 50s, I'm becoming more and more aware of how important tone is in terms of leadership tone, more so than I ever thought before. And perhaps, growing up in organizational transformation, we were always conscious of people not walking the talk. And of course, execution, frameworks, all those things are very important. And the tendency for those things not to follow through with talk has perhaps made us forget how important talk is. And the words and the language that we use in setting a tone. Now, setting a tone without the solid stuff underneath is meaningless, but setting the tone is key. And I think in the recent past, there are two sets of tone setting that have been really quite jarring in one way and highly positive in another. So I want to start with the negative. When we have looked at what's happening in the US and in the UK as well, in terms of basic right outcomes, and I mean right as in good, as not right as in what part of the spectrum you're sitting on politically, where leadership tone has set the most awful, and I'm speaking as an individual, not Franz McAL, but to my mind, some really awful things around human rights and around refugee rights, and that has perhaps led to a narrowing of minds and hearts. and this is me speaking as Teresa individually, I'm very keen to establish. But then we've also seen where setting the right tone has had amazing results. And I look to leaders in the Commonwealth, Jacinda Ardern, what she's done in New Zealand. I think when there was that hate crime, she didn't name the perpetrator. She didn't put it down to a religious issue. She made it an aberration, and that allowed people across the country to come together to say that this is really a very bad thing and a very wrong thing, and people in their own culturally right ways. And it's sort of like disappeared from our consciousness in a way because she silenced it. And that was setting the right tone.
Yes.
Yes, followed by rules. Yes, followed by regulations. But that makes all the difference. So when there are cruel jokes made, when there are wrong things said, that creates a soft power around an oppressive culture that needs to be outed. And I use the word outed literally, not making people come out of a closet where they feel uncomfortable, but outed that this is what you're doing and this is wrong, and let's understand it. And that's why I said, earlier, because sometimes unwittingly we may not get the right language. I'm not gay myself, and I want to make sure that I do it right. So if there is something that shows a lack of understanding, knowledge, appreciation, please let us know, because we want to do the right thing and not to alienate and hurt people along the way.
Thank you.
Sure. I just want to amplify Teresa's point and the great example she used of Ms. Ardern in New Zealand. And apart from tone and, of course, the subsequent granular legislation, etc., that is required, and it was multiple. It was about hate crimes, ammunition, etc. in New Zealand. The symbolism in that, I believe she wore her hijab and approached the community inside, and that's a message about leadership globally, not just New Zealand. And something she has repeated since time. She remains, I think, one of the preeminent leaders of this 21st century to date. Symbolism, I'm using the symbolism to bring it into what I'm adding here in terms of what we're doing here is symbolic today. And I think I would have approached you about getting images out.
Yes.
Something you mentioned, social media being what it is. There was a time where corporations would adopt policies or ways, etc., and hope to get it out in the newspapers and in print. So social media, and that is a broad term. It means WhatsApp, it means LinkedIn, Facebook, and many other platforms, which I'm sure I'm now too old to keep a grip on. But they have long since now gone past standard print media. It is so important to get symbolism of certain gestures out there when a corporate entity does X or Y. It goes without saying. I think it's almost a specialized job now for someone to have that media expertise. When they say media, it's no longer print. It's all these different type of journals. To your question about corporate impact regarding the culture, it is in these efforts. And that's a diligent effort that is required. It is, as I said, a new discipline, a new skill, but these are the things that can impact. Person seeing myself here today and advocating for, etc., that's going to have an impact. Or any one person here sitting here, it's going to have an impact on our particular circles.
Yes. Nira, Jonathan mentioned the transition over the years in terms of media and presence and messaging. Everyone knows your background in that regard. But in terms of getting the right messages out there, do you think that we're doing and this is sort of, I'm going to ask others to comment. So I'm asking you to actually comment on our work now. Do you think that we are effective enough in messaging ourselves and for ourselves and on the issues that we are talking about? Because sometimes we're looking at the allies, but I put you a little bit on the spot there. But
yeah, I mean, talk about dropping me in a minefield and telling me, go. Look, media and communication is something that whatever we're trying to communicate, we we will get it right sometimes and we'll get it wrong sometimes. Hopefully more often right than wrong. I'd say a couple of things. I mean, so not everybody with whom I've worked on media strategy agrees with this, but my view on media strategy is it is better to over time and cumulatively be on page 6 and 17 and whatever with positive messages than sometimes on page 1 with negative messages. So some people feel if you don't hit page 1, you've not achieved anything, right? I believe the power of a cumulative strategy and a long view. And I think for most of you in this room, whether you agree with that or not, your reality is you've had to play a long game, right? In terms of influencing change. So I think that's the first thing. And if you see it contextually like that, I think it influences your strategy. And I mean, messaging changes over time. I think to link it to your previous question, Rudy, I think these conversations are really important. These conversations, when we commemorate the declassification of homosexuality as a mental disease and reminding ourselves why we are here and teaching people like me who would not have, it wouldn't have been on my radar if somebody didn't say Ida Hobbit is a thing. And then I say, well, what is Ida Hobbit? Why is it important? And then I go and I learn and I say, but wait, I'm not comfortable with that. I wouldn't have been comfortable if we didn't have Ida Hobbit, if the status quo had remained. That doesn't sync with my values. So yeah, I can get behind this. I can show up. I can participate. I can be an advocate to the extent that I need to support. And also that's my role, right? My role is to support. It's not to try to jump out front of the people who are living and doing the work day to day. So, you know, I'm not going to answer your question directly because there is no right answer. I think the fact that you're here today means you're doing something right. The fact
That's what I was looking for.
Right? The fact that you've had pride parades means that you're doing something right. The fact that we are making small progress, I think incrementally, means that you are doing something right. Does that mean that along the way you wouldn't explore an unintentional minefield or mine? Probably you will, or somebody will. It may not even be, you know, an official spokesperson for the community. It might be somebody else. And these are things that we'll have to deal with. But I think having the conversation, and if I might make a suggestion around communication, is maybe having a workshop, Kaiso, Pride TT, and whoever else within the community, with the parliamentarians, because Teresa is talking about tone. The tone in the parliament around these issues is deplorable. And I think that, I mean, unnecessary and deplorable. But I do think that when you have voices and organizations pushing people to think, you see, what I learned in my journey in reflecting to come here today and before is that there were a lot of things that I did and said mindlessly. So the society, I grew up in the society, and it was okay to make these kinds of jokes or say these words. I didn't really think about it. But then somebody says, hey, oh, you can say that? Why do you believe what you believe? I was like, I don't know. I just do. So, well, you know, the facts are so. Or why don't you go and read so. Or this is how I feel when you say so. And over time, that changed my perspective radically. And now my daughter my 11-year-old daughter is my dad, so and so and so. And we have these discussions. And I mean, I'm really proud of her. I mean, the other day we were by some friends and she was discussing with a big man. And I mean, I felt sorry for him at the end of it, but, you know, so I don't know if that answers.
It does. And thank you again for that. Because it has to be a two-way conversation. And sometimes exclusion brings exclusion. So the way that we feel, I'm speaking generally, of course, we then act that way. It's part of the trauma cycle. So again, a general feedback for those of you who are now starting this journey, always bear that in mind, you know. And speaking of infancy and now starting this journey, so some of the persons attending today are at a similar stage as HADCO. But we've spoken, obviously there's leadership, but would you be able to share a little bit, Marcia, about what has your approach been to get it structured, start having the conversations, and really framing the issue? And maybe that would help them as well, get along a little faster.
Right. So yes, we're at the infancy stage in terms of policy development, but I can share with you that we do have initiatives around diversity that are already in place. For example, in August of 2021, we started offering, or rather including, recognizing same-sex couples under our medical plan. So that is now a benefit that's being offered to all employees at HADCO currently. Has the response been overwhelming from the employees? Not entirely, and I think that there's still that conversation around the level of comfort and fear that is still there, that we are working on, and we are trying to create that safe, comfortable environment for all employees to work within. I just want to touch on something that you shared in your presentation, and you spoke to the issue of support. And you shared that you had a pretty strong support system. And as we know, many persons within the community do not have that support system. HADCO has a very robust EAP program, which isn't the traditional EAP. It's not structured in the traditional way. For the past 14 years, we have engaged the services of an industrial and behavioral psychologist. So our employees have access to support. They contact her directly. They do not need to go through the HR department to access the levels of support that is required. So while I say we're at the infancy stage in terms of policy, we do have initiatives and strategies that are already in place. Yeah.
Excellent point. And sometimes companies don't necessarily, I suppose they don't see the need to broadcast a lot of what they're doing internally. But as Nirad said, maybe because of conversations like this, the symbolism, to use Jonathan's word, is sometimes important. And companies, we may need to reach out more and find these stories and work with you all to bring it out, because you touched on a very important point about comfort level. And again, maybe Rhonda, you could touch on this as well, or Jonathan, when you are developing a business case around these types of activities, because we're all business people, or many of us in the room are business people, someone may ask the question, well, we only have one gay person in this firm, because as Nirad intimated, based on your perceptions or what you see or what you know, there's one. But not everyone identifies. It's what we call passing. So is there a conversation around that? Like, well, what are we doing all of this for? Maybe we should just work with that one person. Because I can tell you, in spaces I've worked, we know each other. Now, I might be very open, but even within the workplace, sometimes that person will actually feel uncomfortable speaking with me in the lunchroom, because by association. And we talk about it outside of the workplace. But has that sort of counterpoint come up, or the issue around?
I know if I can jump in, you're raising an issue that, first of all, speaks to, well, we have to get to the heart of it in terms of HR and the economic focus on any company. in that we're talking about acts of discrimination, which has been touched on in previous presentations, which may lead to one, as it's excluding to the point of where persons may leave an organization, and I should put in brackets to everything, talented people. You run the risk of talented people leaving because they feel hounded out. You run the risk of talented people not even applying to your organization because they feel they may not belong. And ultimately, you run the risk of, and this is long-term, of course, where you're going to gain a reputation as that type of organization that is not seen as a place for inclusion. And there may be many implications to that down the road. I touched on the fact that so often the actions of a head of HR are interpreted by the larger population, and how to act and treat and how to perceive the actual culture of the organization. Too much of it, how would I say? I believe it is critical. The HR function is about creating that perfect resource from the humans in front of it, from the staff in front of it, in terms of our product, ultimately productivity, but also, of course, in terms of some level of harmony and constructive work a constructive work environment that comes from that. It is the antithesis of the HR function to be allowing room or any ground or any culture for discrimination. It can only be seen as anti-productivity, ultimately anti-business. And as I said, apart from the day-to-day civil war that may be going on by those who feel subjugated to it, the organization may well be missing out on genuine talent.
Yes.
Who just say this place doesn't look like, from what I've heard, it's not a place for people.
Yeah,
like
you preempt.
You don't want to be that kind of organization where, that's the perception out there.
Rudy, if I may add, I think creating psychological safety for employees is also very important. So when you create that environment where they're comfortable to be themselves, where they don't feel they have to blend in or pretend to be somebody they're not, then they would be expressive and share their views and so on, right? So I don't know if Faye recalls, in our Lunch and Learn, there was a person who came out. She said, I want to say that I am a lesbian. And to some on the call, of course, they're hearing that for the first time. I didn't know that she was. So to your point about you do a policy and it may impact one person, you're right, there may be others. But if you create the psychological safety, then they feel comfortable to be themselves. Absolutely. To flourish. Yeah. That's correct.
Yes. And this is all tying into what we've been discussing in terms of tone, symbolism, attitude, policy, guidelines. All of that is what makes to that type of culture.
Now, we have a lot more that we could talk about, but time is against us, right? And as Teresa said, this is a start. It was meant to be symbolic as well as substantive, because colleagues from other companies are listening to you all. And the stream jumped when this session started. We saw an uptake, right? So thank you for adding your brand equity to ours. But full disclosure, as was said earlier, of course, I sit in another firm that is big on DEI, EY, and we are adding our authenticity in that regard to our service lines by rolling out our ESG lines. And later on, as you all know, companies are going to participate in a workshop that looks at the DEI policy, which falls within the S framework of the environmental, social, and governance models. So perhaps to bring this session to a fore, we've spoken a lot about different aspects of this. Teresa, starting with you, perhaps you could chat a little bit about, is ANSA on that ESG journey? How does this fit in? And is that a framework that companies could use to probably help them structure their approach to DEI?
Yes, yes, and yes. Absolutely.
Nirad, any thoughts on? I know
Yeah,
Well, I'll let you share.
Yeah, we are in the process of launching our ESG committee, which would allow companies to share and to learn. We have an ESG toolkit for companies that was done by the UN as a draft, and we're finalizing. So definitely the answer is yes. I just want to correct myself because I keep forgetting. I said 2005. We made our statement in 2015. Sorry, I wasn't at AMCHAM in 2005. But still. So the answer is yes. And I would just, last comment that I want to make is, one of the things that influenced my thinking around this is reading books by Richard Florida, The Rise of the Creative Class and Creative Cities. Richard Florida is an economist who was based at the U of T. I'm not sure if he's there anymore. And basically what he said is, if you create, so take the conversation we just had about companies and employees unleashing their potential. If your society creates the conditions for openness, for inclusiveness, for collaboration across sectors and with people from different backgrounds, you're going to have the most creativity. And he identified one of the things that will most inhibit that is a set of societal conditions, inclusive of laws, that make people who identify differently feel uncomfortable and excluded. So as a nation, we will lose if we say Elton John can't come and sing here, or things of that nature, or our laws make people feel that way.
Thank you very much.
And just to touch on by extension.
Sure. And you can share your words.
Okay. It appears Trinidad is pivoting finally full on to tourism, the tourism industry. We've seen the data and the stats regarding tourism earlier. Where are we going? If this remains the culture, we have to really start taking stock of what product do we wish to present to this wider world. It's a much smaller world than the one we were all born in, I can assure you. People are aware of just where people stand on so many things now. Regarding, in terms of your lead question, well, as I said, UTT is now on the books as formally not anti-discriminatory against any form of orientation. Otherwise, wearing my hat as representing the chamber, it is innate in the chamber. I need to explain that perhaps. It is innate in the chamber's constitution philosophy to support all government, all state legislation and activities primarily. It is therefore, I wouldn't say necessarily wait and see. It is a case of let things come into fact, and the chamber will lend its full support and advocacy. That said, PRITT is aware that there are several within the chamber who are of course great advocates for the efforts and the initiatives, and we shall certainly seek to be available for any assistance we can continue to lend in terms of the shaping of policies, etc.
Thank you. Teresa, I know you have to leave us, so we'll allow you to head out, but thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Be safe.
You too.
Take it. So, and Rhonda, on your accord then, I mean, what would you say would be your call to action around framing this for companies and how they can take their discussion forward?
Okay. I think our advice would be, don't underestimate the power of employee resource groups, right? It's a way to engage and empower your employees so like-minded persons can come together and champion the cause and advance the cause. So they would be the ones to say, this is what is absent and this is what we need, and you're able to close some gaps. I would also want to reiterate the importance of tone from the top, from leaders, right? Because, I mean, Jane Elliott, 55 years ago in her Blue Eye, Brown Eye experiment, showed us the power of leaders to influence climate, right? So leaders have the power to influence climate either for better or for worse. So it's important that you articulate the inclusive standards, you model the inclusive standards, and you enforce and reinforce them. And that would be a definite pro tip.
Enforce and reinforce. Thank
Yes.
you. So, Marsha, I promised you, so I will let you perhaps close by introducing what you wanted us to show, because I know you HADCO wanted to have its leadership presence felt,
Yes.
but you can close and introduce
And
the
just
video.
to lead on a little bit on what Rhonda just said, for us, the initiatives regarding diversity, while it is going to be led by HR, it does have executive sponsorship. So we have our CEOs on board. We have their support, and I think that is critical to the implementation of any sort of policy with regards to this. The video clip that we wanted to show really is a clip from our 25th anniversary, which was in 2017, but it speaks to the values that are enshrined within HADCO, and it speaks to our C-suite managers speaking about their own experiences with the organization. They speak about the inclusion that has always been part of HADCO's operations and will continue to be as well.
I think that's a fantastic point to close on. So let's hear it directly from the leaders' mouths.
We're a distribution company with 3 Clecker divisions: wine and spirits, food and beverage, and electrical. When we first started the business, we didn't really have any illusions of grandeur.
As the years went by, we just got very diverse, and it just sort of morphed into what it is today.
Back in 2001, HADCO had at least 116 people. Today, the group has 776 employees, so we have grown tremendously, and it has been a ride of a lifetime.
The company was born out of total focus on our customers, our relationship with customers, customer service, listening to what the customer wants and then delivering upon that is what we are about. Not only do we pride ourselves with our relationship with customers, our suppliers are companies that we've been dealing with for the last 25 years.
Well, one of the things that HADCO is known for, it's 24-hour delivery. There is no one else, no other distributor on this island who can boast of that, who can do that.
If we could get it right as a company and we do something that's needed in the country and we do it in a good, sustainable fashion, we are already adding value to Trinidad and Tobago.
We've contributed to the community. We've become very much present in the whole cancer awareness and breast cancer with our partnership with Scotiabank and Vita's House. This year, we have gone into the whole aspect of culture and promoting local culture with Phase 2 Pan Grove.
Well, we have 6 core values, and we're really passionate about them. And they are accountability, customer satisfaction, employee well-being, honesty and integrity, respect and tolerance for all, and a collaborative culture. And I'd like to explain those. Accountability means that we are accountable to providing a clean and lovely environment, ensuring that you know what your role is. The employees are accountable for ensuring that they come to work every day and they do the job that they were hired for. Customer satisfaction. There are 2 types of customers. The customers that we sell because we are a distribution company, and then there's the employee. We are each other's customer. We must give that satisfaction with whatever needs the employee will need. Honesty and integrity. This company was built by 3 men which upheld honesty and integrity, and that is something that we all follow. Employee well-being, that is real special to us. Employees are our assets. So we have things like a gym. We say eat well, exercise so that your mind will be strong when you come to work and you won't be stressed out. We have a EAP program that has a psychologist on board. So gone are the days where you could say leave your troubles at the door. Come to work. If you have issues, you meet with our psychologist and she helps you with those issues. Collaborative culture. What is that at HADCO? It's the passion that we have when we come to work to be a team player, work with us, do things that that you would normally do as a team. You work together, step out the box, and respect and tolerance for all. We have all areas of people of Trinidad and Tobago. Every creed and race finds an equal place here.
We think we have incredible people working here. When we look at a whole group of people that are in top management, as well as in sub-management, as well as beyond that, we do have a solid group that have been here from more than 20 years, some of them. And if you think back, probably in the first 5 years of our existence, we probably didn't have more than 30, 40 people working within the whole group. So when you look at that and you see that there's a strong number of people 15 years and over, and even a few 20 years, or just a bit beyond 20 years, it does tell a story that we have good people who have stayed here. I mean, they've probably not had it easy because, working with us is a difficult thing. At the end of the day, we are demanding. The business is a demanding business, and we've pushed aggressively to grow this business in a short space of time. But by and large, excellent people. We have good people who have been here for a long time. We have a lot of new additions, people who have come in the last 10 years. Again, if you look at our long service awards, people have been here 10 to 15 years. It's a big group of people.
It is a very inclusive environment because we are so diversified in our operations, from retail, warehousing, distribution, and administration and sales. We have a wide cross-section of people here which bring together different personalities, different levels of expertise. So we're very inclusive. Our environment is very dynamic. We're on the go all the time, very fast-paced. There's always something to learn. There's so many opportunities for growth in here. Like I could say, for example, I came in 2005 to manage the ice cream manufacturing plant across at JRJ, and I have moved through over the past 12 years to now be in the head of finance. So the opportunities are great in terms of being an employee in here.
HADCO impacts on your life the way you want it to. You want to be better, HADCO could help you to become better. The growth factor is the three brothers and their production. Their desire to do better, to do more.
The strength comes from us actually knowing how each other think and what we do. And before I do something, I would say, what would Joseph do? What would John do instinctively?
And I think that the three of us, are very unique in each of our ways. We all have our specialties. We all have our qualifications in different areas. And then we just bring that great working relationship to the table. And I think that that's been a real success factor for us.
The three CEOs of this company, they lead by example. And we just don't talk it, we walk it. They are one. It's one CEO in three bodies.
We think 25 years on, we feel good about where we are as a company and where we're going to go from here.
Walk it. Every creed and race finds an equal place. Teresa said, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a simple journey. Nirad, you beckon for us, show up. Rhonda, psychologically safe environments. I think everyone took that point away. And Jonathan, symbolism is important. So thank you very much for joining us today for Ida Hobbit, the first annual DI conference. You've broken new ground and you've showed up and created symbolism. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.